I'm Ron Barnes, the president-elect. I think Alon wanted to just test me out to see if I could really do this. So that's why I'm here today, and he's enjoying vacation. So welcome to the celebration of service. I think we have a wonderful program today, and it's a great time to be together. I asked Tim Jessen to come forward to do a reflection. Tim?
Please be seated. I'm warning you in advance that today's reflection will be sad. And when I realized that we would be in this room and closer to you than in the Frangipani room, I was content because I need to look you all straight in the eye and share deep emotion with you. How many have been in a room when you're on Zoom? Not here, when you're in a room on Zoom and you prepare to enter the meeting and you get in a chat room with 3 or 4 other people. How many people have done that? Okay, a good number of you. It's an interesting experience with all kinds of conversation possible, just like when we're sitting here before the meeting at our tables. A few weeks ago, I learned on Facebook that chat room brought President Alon together with Raj Adawi, and they realized they were both on Cape Cod, and eventually they got together in person. But a few weeks ago, actually 3 months ago, I had a similar experience that I wanted to share here at some point. I thought 3 months might be enough time to allow me to conceal my emotions, but maybe not. We'll see. On Mother's Day weekend, what I consider almost a curse in the civil calendar, my precious daughter-in-law, Eva, and my son, Chris, had a baby. Their first and long-awaited. They live in Little Rock, Arkansas, where he is a pediatric nurse and she is a United Methodist deacon. But the baby was in trouble in delivery. He was named Ezekiel, or Zeke for short, and since his other grandmother was a Methodist minister, she baptized him. But after about 48 hours of life, they decided to let him go. I couldn't go to church that Sunday. I couldn't go to Rotary on Tuesday. I couldn't face all you people and try to put on a happy, smiley face. My emotions were too fragile, too close to the surface, but I decided I would try the chat room before the meeting just to see who was there. Providentially, I would say, there was Joy Harder, whom I knew as a death doula and a close friend. And actually, we were born and grew up in New York's Hudson Valley at different times, but we had shared background. 2 others were there, one a Rotarian, who had confided to me during the conference here about a recent loss, and another was a member of the church we attend. So I just started pouring out my heart. So healing, so therapeutic, such a gift to receive from Joy. That's all I need to say. At the end of perhaps 10 or 15 minutes together, I said to Joy, it was surprising that no one else entered the room, as they would have been completely confused about what was happening. She said with her ubiquitous smile, they tried, but I didn't let them enter. How wise, how comforting, how beautiful. A side of Rotary that you wouldn't know about unless I told you. And I decided 3 months from May might work. But I am also sad today for the destruction in Kentucky, where I started my Christian ministry 50 years ago. A picture of the church I served was in USA Today on Saturday. And I knew as a child the young woman who took the picture. I'm not sure I'll sign up for a reflection again soon. The last time I signed up for a reflection, Ron Jensen died. And I reflected on his life and the person that brought me into Rotary. This time, Deacon Judge Mark Kellums was suddenly and unexpectedly taken from us. He'll be remembered next Tuesday. But for now, let us have a moment of silence and remembrance for him, and reflecting on all the sadness in our world and those in our Rotary family and beyond that still suffer. Amen.
Tim, I hope you do sign up again, because you're, again, every time you're up here, you lead us spiritually and you lead from the heart, and it's very helpful, and we give our condolences to your family. To introduce our guest, past president, Mike Baker.
Got some good guests here today. Hope we get the names right. I got some new magnifiers to put on to help me with that. Andrea Lutz, she's a guest of the speaker, Christian. Welcome. Michael Spalding, also a guest of Christian. Welcome. I have two guests that I invited from the Sycamore Land Trust. Tim Dunphy, who is the board president. Tim. And deer in the headlights look a little bit, because I think he's been with Sycamore Land Trust for about 2 days, but Chris Erickson's with Sycamore Land Trust, and he's the land development manager. Evan, I believe, Fruits with Walt Kuhn. Where's Walt? Good to see you too, Walt. Thank you for joining us. Now get this right. Mary Getsy, who's a guest of Martha Wales. There we go. Oh, there you are. So welcome to all of our guests. I hope you'll come back and visit us. And if you have any interest in what Rotary does, talk to somebody at your table. We'd love to have you come and join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I do want to alert you to an article that I believe is in the HT this morning, recognizing one of our outstanding Rotarians and past president, Leslie Green. Mayor John Hamilton marked April 1st, it's Leslie Green Day in Bloomington, and she also received the Sagamore of the Wabash Award. And again, there was an article in the paper talking about her really work hard effort for people with disabilities. So congratulations, Leslie. I don't see Leslie here today, but we all are proud of her and the work that she's done for people with disabilities in our community. And
Ron?
thank you, Tim, for remembering Mark. And again, we'll have an opportunity to more formally do that next week. I would like to also thank all of the volunteers that work from our club to make the Teachers Warehouse Supply Drive a roaring success. There are a lot of people here, and I'm going to take some time just to recognize them because they worked hard, standing in some cases out in the sun for 2 hours. But Art Olmich, Steve Engel, Winston Schindel, Liz Feil, Steve Moberly, Sarah Laughlin, Liz Irwin, Jim Bright, And I need to also recognize his wife, Ann, who co-chaired this and was a real bulldog in getting things organized and getting the volunteers out. Cindy Nehart, Dave Meyer, Owen Johnson, Bill Oates, Rex Hillary, Marcus Debro, who chaired this, Marilyn Wood, who worked in the garage as everything came in. She was the official sorter and queen of inventory. Glenda Murray, and then of course Natalie, who helped get the word out and helped us get everything going. Special announcements, obviously Michael Shermas, who's our producer today, Tim Jessen for his reflection, Joy Harder for her good work with our folks that are virtual, Mike Baker for introducing guests, Art Olmich for being the official greeter. And again, Sarah Laughlin's going to do the roundabout today. So we're really excited about reading that when Sarah's done with her good work. And yeah, thank you, Michael. We need to have our Zoom guests introduced.
Thank you, Ron. I do want to welcome two guests we have on Zoom this afternoon. I would like to welcome Michelle Cohen, who is a former member of the Brown County Rotary Club, who is anticipating joining our club when the time is right here soon. So welcome to Michelle. And she's a guest of Jim Bright. And then we also have joining us a guest of Teresa Clare, Jacob Black, who is new to Bloomington in May and is with Herlo Wealth Management. And we're just glad to have both of you joining us this afternoon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Have some Rotarians to recognize. Bill Perkins' birthday was August 1st. And we have member anniversaries. Past president Mike Baker, 30 years. Right? Kate Cruikshank, 7 years. Bill Oates, 4 with this club and 34 total. Patrick Smith, 1, and Lee Witt, 19. At this point, I'd like to introduce Michael Shermas to introduce our program for the day. Michael?
Thanks, Ron. I'm really happy today to introduce Kristen Freitag. Let me give you the formal stuff. Kristen Freitag joined Conservation Law Center in 2019 as its second executive director, replacing founder and longtime director W. William Weeks III. For the previous 18 years, he served as an executive director of Sycamore Land Trust, a nonprofit land conservation organization in Southern Indiana, and I'm betting that's where most of you know him from. He graduated from the Morris School of Law in 1997 and clerked from 1997 to 1999 for former Indiana Chief Justice Randall T. Shepard. He received his PhD from IU O'Neill School of Public Environmental Affairs in 2010, where his research focused on the implementation of the National Environmental Policy Act on public agencies, including the U.S. Forest Service. The topic of his dissertation was an institutional analysis of the National Environmental Policy Act in the United States Forest Service. He received the Distinguished Honor Award in 2007 from Indiana Governor Mitch Daniels. He lives in the beautiful unglaciated hardwood forests of Southern Indiana with his wife Paige and 2 Labrador retrievers. I've known Kristen for several years and worked through the nonprofit alliance that I help with. And he's always been an outstanding director and a pusher of nonprofit causes. And I was thrilled to ask because I just think he has some really important things to say. Without further ado, Kristen.
Thank you, everybody, for having me today. I have spoken with this group before, but it's probably been 10 years or thereabouts. I think I mentioned this story the last time I spoke to Rotary, but I'm going to make sure I mention it again because it was meaningful in my life. When I was in high school in the summer of 1989, between my junior and senior year of high school, I did an exchange program to France. I was a summer exchange student in Normandy, France. I lived with chocolatiers. Actually, it's a true story. As a 16-year-old, I spent a summer with Normandy chocolatiers. And that was only made possible because in Valparaiso, Indiana, the Rotarians gave me $1,000 to make that happen in my life. My parents were both social workers, and I wouldn't say that we grew up poor. We always had food on the table, but $1,000 to send your kid to Normandy to live with chocolatiers was probably not in the family budget. And it was because of Rotary that I was able to make that happen. That changed my life. All the programs that you do like that, I mean, I think you know that in the abstract, but let me just tell you, as one of the people that it impacted, I mean, your programs change lives when you are able to give somebody even something fairly modest like $1,000. It was meaningful to me. So thank you on behalf of my own personal stake in it, but I'm sort of thanking Rotary International, but the Valparaiso chapter specifically. But thank you for being involved. I'm glad to be here to talk to you. I know many of you in the room, not all of you. Bloomington acts pretty cosmopolitan sometimes, but it's still small town Indiana. And if you live here long enough, the odds are you're going to bump into the same people over and over again. And thankfully, we live in a community just full of people like you who show up and are counted when it comes to doing good things and making the community better. I was very happy to see Charlotte join us today. And if there's ever an embodiment of that sort of spirit, both for Rotary and just for Bloomington in general, we should all be more like Charlotte, I think, probably. Anyway, I'm here today to talk to you about some of the new stuff that I've been working on personally. I'm very proud of it, but I think you should know about it because some of these things that we're working on at Conservation Law Center, where I work now, they are projects that have never been attempted in the Midwest. They're big medicine. Of course, I would say that, and you'll have to judge that for yourself. But as Michael and a few others maybe intimated, I worked for Sycamore Land Trust for 18 years. I worked with Mike Baker and Tim Dunphy, who are both here. My work has changed, but conservation is still at the core of it. What Conservation Law Center is, that I joined 3 years ago, it's a nonprofit law firm. I'm on the faculty at the law school, so I'm an adjunct. I'm not adjunct. I'm a clinical faculty member. Should probably get that right next time. I'm actually not an adjunct. I'm a clinical faculty member, associate clinical faculty at the law school. Conservation Law Center is an independent 501c3 nonprofit, but we're affiliated with the law school. We set it up independently to be a separate thing so that if we needed, because we've seen this happen around the country at different state schools, we are a state-funded institution, as you know. If we sued the wrong bad guy makes a complaint that goes up the ranks, and we could get some law schools around the country have caught pressure from big political donors when they don't like the work that's being done. So we set it up to be an independent nonprofit so that we wouldn't have to worry about that. If we want to sue somebody, we go ahead and sue somebody. But we are an independent nonprofit law firm. We provide pro bono legal services to nonprofit groups and government agencies in Indiana and around the country. We have probably advised groups like Sycamore Land Trust to save about 20,000 acres around the country. And they don't have to pay for a lawyer. They have like the best lawyers who know how to do the best stuff, giving them advice on how to pull off complex land deals. What is their liability when they invite members of the public to hike on their property? How do they, we work on a number of different things. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little bit about Conservation Law Center here at the beginning for about 2 minutes, but then I'm going to spend most of the time talking about one in particular project that we have going lately called the Southern Indiana Sentinel Landscape. So that's kind of, that's going to be the agenda here today. I will try not to bore you too badly. That is the most boring part of that. So we'll skip that. What does Conservation Law Center do? We have different focus areas. We operate as the environmental law clinic for the law school. So if law students want to take a 3-credit course and learn how to be a lawyer, law is a funny thing. I mean, name another profession where you're required to get a professional license, but you're not required to do any training at all in order to get the professional license. Law clinics provide that training. You're not required to do it, but students who want to be, we have an intellectual property clinic, we've got an entrepreneurship clinic, we've got a family law clinic. We've had different clinics over the years that have come and gone. Conservation Law Center was founded in 2005. And so we work with students on live projects. They're not hypothetical things. We represent Sycamore Land Trust on a complex land deal, and students are helping us do that. We're working on Indiana water quality and what to do about failing septic systems across the state, which is a real problem. We provide pro bono legal services to government agencies and nonprofit groups to try to solve the problems that we face in Indiana around the Midwest. The areas that we focus on in terms of subject matter are land, water, and species. Obviously, teaching and education is part of our mission too, as I just described. But in terms of the environmental substance of things, it's land, water, and species. Land is easy. We advise Sycamore Land Trust on how to save the world. And like I said, we've done about 20,000 acres around the country. Water, in our case, that ends up being a lot of Indiana water quality. Indiana's blessed with some of the like in terms of quantity, we've got a lot of water relative to our neighbors around the Midwest, but we've got some real challenges in terms of water quality. And it ranges from waste, human waste and agricultural waste to chemical runoff. And there's lots of different challenges that we faced in terms of our water quality. And we're trying to get the legislator to take positive steps to address some of those things. So we work on water quality. We also work on Great Lakes issues. Some of you will have read about, I don't expect you to, but some of you will have read about Indiana Supreme Court case several years ago that we were the counsel on that was called Gunderson versus State. Having grown, I grew up in Valparaiso, as I said, and that's not too far from Lake Michigan. When my family would want to go walking along the beach, we would immediately bump into fences and barriers and no trespassing signs and private property signs. And that's not the law. The people were claiming the land all the way down to the water, but that is not the law. That is land that is owned by the state of Indiana since statehood, but it took a lawsuit in order to get that established. Conservation Law Center were the lawyers in that case. That went all the way to the Indiana Supreme Court, which we won unanimously. They appealed all the way to the US Supreme Court, who let the Indiana decision stand in place. So I don't want to say that we gave a gift to the people of Indiana because it was already Indiana property. We just sort of clawed it back from the private landowners who were trying to restrict people from walking along the beach and using it as a public resource. So that's another one that we've been quite proud of in the waterfront. And with regard to wildlife, we are one of the country's foremost experts on the Endangered Species Act. So we devote a lot of attention to helping Indiana bats, whether it's in terms of protecting habitat or making sure that wind farms are done in the proper way so it doesn't just wipe out the federally endangered Indiana bat. But we are the experts on Endangered Species Act. And as I said, we work with students along the way. Michael, could you advance that for me possibly? It doesn't seem to be working here. There you go. All right, you can advance it again. We're going to talk about Southern Indiana Sentinel Landscape. The Sentinel Landscape Program was a program that was cooked up by 3 federal agencies in the year 2013. The 3 federal agencies in this case are the Department of Defense, so military, and the Department of Agriculture, USDA, and the Department of the Interior, which in this case ends up being the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. And the idea in 2013 was to protect military bases across the country, because military bases across the country face all sorts of what they call encroachment issues. For example, in Southern Indiana, we have 4 military bases. You're only probably familiar with 2 of them, but you've probably heard of Camp Atterbury, where they do Army National Guard training in Johnson County. And you've probably heard of Crane, well, it's got different names over the years, but we all just call it Crane. Happens to be 63,000 acres, and at 63,000 acres, it's the 3rd largest naval base in the entire world, which is a funny, it's a funny byproduct of World War II. What they used to make there was big bullets. Nowadays, if we want to launch something bad at something that goes boom at a bad guy, it's a laser guided missile. Used to be just big bullets. Think about World War II, right? You have ships and they're firing giant bullets out of these cannons off of ships. They made them in Southern Indiana because Southern Indiana was hard to invade. Essentially, if you wanted to make munitions, you didn't, you could invade the coast, but it would be hard to invade Indiana. So unfortunately, a lot of those big bullets are still sitting at Crane because there's not really much you can do with them. Nowadays, you have to, if you make things that go boom, you have to make them so that they can be taken apart. It wasn't always the case. Now they still got a problem with that. But so you're aware of Atterbury, you're aware of Crane. Think about Atterbury. 20, 30 years ago, Atterbury's out in the middle of nowhere. Nowadays, Johnson County is a bedroom community for Indianapolis, right? So residential development has come right up to the border of Atterbury. What do they have to do at Atterbury? They do National Guard training. They blow stuff up. I mean, they make things go boom. You remember when we had the helicopter do training stuff here? People complained, right? Well, think about if you have your house right next to Crane. You're going to complain about helicopters and flyovers from those big C3s, and you're going to have, things are exploding. Well, nature doesn't complain. Deer in Turkey. And so the Navy and the Army, the military, they like nature as their neighbors because nature doesn't complain. Nature doesn't have problems with things going boom. Nature doesn't produce agriculture runoff that goes into because these bases drink their own water. They treat and they gather and collect and treat and drink their own water. Well, ag runoff and residential housing runoff, that affects their ability to drink their own water, makes it more expensive. It affects their military readiness, ultimately. So they cooked up this program in 2013 to try to protect the military bases from all sorts of encroachments like that, to try to buffer the bases. And they thought, heck, what else do we spend? What else do we care about? And can we check off some other boxes while we're protecting the bases? And if you want to know what somebody cares about, find out what they spend money on. So you look at what the government was spending money on. All the farm bill programs, they try to keep family farms as farms. They work on, there's the wetlands protection program. There's the soil protection programs, like Conservation Reserve Program is one of the big ones around here. There's all sorts of programs that are in the farm bill already that helps private landowners in one way or another. We also spend money on enforcing the Endangered Species Act. Every federal agency is required to abide by the Endangered Species Act. That's another thing we spend money on. So they thought, the three federal agencies thought, while we do base protection, we can check off some other boxes. They built the Sentinel landscape program. Since 2013, there's been seven of them named around the country. About a year and a half ago, we took on the project to put in an application to make Southern Indiana a Sentinel landscape. And the competition on this stuff is fierce, as you can imagine. We're up against like Eglin Air Force Base in Florida and some of these giant military facilities. And they chose Southern Indiana as one of the new 3 Sentinel landscapes. It's 3.5 acres. I don't even know, I'm not even looking at this screen, so I'm not even sure if I covered all those things, but hopefully I did. We already talked about nature makes good neighbors, really, but we looked at what we had in Southern Indiana and we said, we think we can put in a good application. We've got 4 military bases. We've got 3 national wildlife refuges, a bunch of state parks, a bunch of state forests. We've got the Hoosier National Forest. We've got these resources. And if you look at the land use, we're unglaciated in Southern Indiana. We've got huge forest blocks. That's one of the things that makes Southern Indiana such a special ecological thing, is that we've got huge hardwood forest blocks that are mostly uninterrupted. And then you've got these 2 forks of the White River that cut through that landscape and provide a really natural way to tie the landscape together. So what we conceived of was an application to the feds to name 3.5 million acres in Southern Indiana. That's the size of Connecticut. That's 50% bigger than Yellowstone National Park, to name that a Sentinel landscape. So we're one of now 10 in the country. We're one of the 3 that just got selected. I gave you a sense of size. 3.5 million acres, the size of Connecticut. To give you a sense of economic impact, like I said, program, there was 7 Sentinel landscapes until recently. So since 2013, in the last 9 years, on those 7, the federal government has spent $500 million on conservation issues on those 7 areas around the country. It's not brand new money. It's not like all of a sudden Conservation Law Center gets $100 million. That'd be really cool, but that's not the way it's going to work. All that money goes to landowners to try to incentivize them to do better land management on their own personal property. If you've got erosion problems, then there are programs out there that you can get connected to through the federal government that helps you implement land management practices that deals with erosion. Maybe it's buffer strips, maybe it's water bars. There are programs that help you deal with invasive species. There are lots of different programs, and what Sentinel Landscape does is say all of those programs are now going to be prioritized to the Sentinel Landscape. They're not new programs. It's not new money. I think when we talk to people, sometimes people are like, oh, this is just more money that's the government's throwing around again, blah, blah, blah. And it's not. It's existing money that is now being directed to a particular place, and that particular place happens to be Southern Indiana. So let's look at a map, because if you're a conservationist, you love maps, right? Anyway, I love maps, and I'm the one with the microphone, so we get to talk about this today. Again, it's 3.5 million acres. The purple is the outer boundary. To give you a sense, I think you can have a sense of where we are. Bloomington's smack dab in the middle of that area, or almost in the middle of that area. And you can see what we used, the squiggly line, the purple is the outer boundary. We used what are called HUC 12 watersheds, which are kind of medium-sized watersheds. That's how we drew the boundary. We were going to use counties, but we realized that we originally proposed to the federal government making all of southern Indiana a Sentinel landscape, 6.5 million acres. They told us that we wouldn't get it if we didn't pare it down. So we pared it down using watershed boundaries. And we tried to make it the tightest place that would serve the purpose of the program, which is first and foremost, protect the military bases. You can see in pink, we've got the 4 military bases. And then you've got, the reason I like this particular map when we talk about it is because you can see the forest block that is such a heavy component of this landscape, which includes on this map, both the light green as well as the dark gray. The dark gray is the Hoosier National Forest. That's already protected in one form or another. And then the lighter green is private forest that we'd like to keep as forest instead of letting it go to a different land use. And then you've got, like I said, these riparian or rivers and stream corridors that provide a natural tie together. One of the things that's this Sentinel landscape program is the largest conservation project that's ever been undertaken in the Midwest. Nothing else. There's another Sentinel landscape in the Midwest in northern Minnesota. That's 700,000 acres. So this is 5 times bigger than that. It's the largest conservation project ever done in the Midwest. And it differs from the way that conservation has traditionally been done across the country. I can tell you, I did Sycamore Land Trust for 18 years, right? And the way that conservation has typically been done across the country, not just here, across the country, you identify where that thing that you care about lives, that cool little thing lives on that 200 acres, and let's save that 200 acres. And that's typically how it's been done. But if you can't connect, particularly in the face of climate change, as conditions change, what if the reason for saving that thing is not there in 10 years from now? Then what was the point? What was the purpose of that? If you can't figure out a way to make things connected across the landscape, then you don't give things the ability to adapt. And a different way of thinking about that has come to be known as landscape scale conservation. It's looking instead of that 200-acre parcel, which we would call maybe postage stamp conservation. That's not to say that those things are bad projects. Some of those are most like truly amazing places that you should go see, and that little cool thing does still live there. But really in the long term, I think as a conservation community, we've realized that landscape scale, bigger thinking, connected landscapes, that's really how we provide the most bang for the buck in terms of human health, in terms of the ecosystem services that this land provides for endangered species and all the benefits that flow from landscape scale. It's the right way to go about things. And so when we designed this, we designed it with a landscape mindset. So I could get into the weeds, and if anybody wants to talk privately afterwards or even over email or set up a time for coffee, I'm happy to do that, of course. But I don't feel like this was the right time to get into the weeds at how we're going to save all of this. There are ways that we have in mind for how we're going to save all this. We're viewing this as a 20-year project. I mean, we're not going to save 3.5 million acres. That's not really realistic. I mean, honestly, 3.5 million acres. What we have to do is to get the private landowners within this area to improve their land management by making resources available to them to improve their land management, which benefits all of us as well as the critters. It's going to benefit all the people in terms of water quality and climate change and all the good things. We have 2 new staff people that we've hired to oversee this. One is Mike Spalding that's joining us here today. He's the project coordinator. Mike's a forester by training. He was one of the forest managers on Yellowwood and other state forests, as well as Camp Atterbury more recently. That's where we stole him from. And we've got Rob McCrae is also joining us as an attorney to oversee this project. Andrea Lutz is with us. She oversees every aspect of all of our stuff. Generally, she's not even going to deny that. I can promise you she won't even deny that. But we have, this is not just something that we're dabbling in. This is a signature project for Conservation Law Center. We've got dedicated staff who are going to be waking up and thinking about how to push the ball forward every single day. And I think you're going to see short-term gains, but I think this is a 20-year project. And if we can show how you do landscape scale conservation in the Midwest, where unlike Montana, where you can work on 10,000 acres at a time, in Indiana, you're working on 100 acres at a time because of the fragmentation of the property. If we can show how it's done in Southern Indiana, we can show how this could change the way the conservation is practiced east of the Mississippi River, where the land parcels are small. The potential for this is huge, and I just wanted you to know about it. I'm happy to answer. Do we have any more slides? I don't even remember. Not really. If anybody wants to reach out to me, feel free. And I'm happy to answer any questions today also. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Christian, for your message today. The question I have is, I've been working with the USDA here locally on some invasive plant. Do you connect with them on an individual basis to kind of coordinate the efforts that you're making in this project?
Yeah, Mike Spalding, that's going to be one of his primary things that he does. One of our early jobs as we get this project rolling is making sure that every landowner in that area knows that this is a thing. There's a Sentinel, Indiana landscape out there, Southern Indiana Sentinel landscape project out there. It can connect you with resources you would not otherwise have access to. Like maybe it's worth mentioning, a lot of those programs that you would have access to as a landowner, those are competitive programs. There's only so much money in that pot. And so you raise your hand and say, I want to protect my 40 acres of wetlands that is always flooded back there, and I'm sick of planting it because I'm always losing my crops. I'll put it in the Wetlands Reserve Program. You're up against the guy in Kentucky and Illinois and Ohio. That's a competitive process. What the Sentinel landscape designation does is gives you a bump. You get extra points on your application, meaning you're more likely to have access to it. So that's not really an answer to your question, but it's getting there. What our job is going to be making sure that all the landowners in Southern Indiana know that this is a thing, and they now have increased access to resources that they wouldn't otherwise have. And it's Mike's job to connect them with the right program. They're going to call up and say, I've got that 40 acre. And then he's going to say, well, the Wetlands Reserve Program might be a good option for you, or the Conservation Reserve Program might be a good option for you. And you know who you need to talk to? You need to talk to Beth Clarizia at NRCS through the USDA. So yes, we will be a clearinghouse for information for that. Charlotte.
Is there a way that you can talk to landowners to think about preserving Lake Monroe instead of potentially endangering it?
I don't know, I think everybody heard that. The idea was, what can we do to help Lake Monroe? I think was the very broad sense of that.
Basic. And how can we convince landowners around there to understand the importance of that?
Good question. I was glad to see Michelle Cohen joined us as a guest here. Michelle is the director of the Lake Monroe Water Fund, one of only about, I don't know, there's less than 20 water funds around the country. I'm on the board of the Lake Monroe Water Fund, so I'm happy to give that a plug. The Lake Monroe Water Fund, ultimately, the idea is to try to figure out ways to have ongoing funding for lake improvement projects. Like, for example, I'm not saying this will happen. I don't want to alarm anybody. This is not a real thing, so don't quote me on this. But like, for example, a voluntary roundup program on water bills or something like that. If you wanted to give an extra 50 cents, you check your little box, that goes into a pot of money. That could be done, that could be used for projects like erosion control, put down some riprap, deal with invasive species, all the things that are, all the problems that are causing siltation in Lake Monroe. There are ways to address that, and Lake Monroe Water Fund's trying to figure out ways to get that stuff funded. That's what, like, you should pay attention to that organization when you see that in the newspaper. In terms of Sentinel landscape and what we are going to try to do, these are all going to be voluntary programs. So you're right. I mean, we don't have a stick to be able to go to a landowner and say, your land is a problem in particular, and you need to change your practices. They'll tell us to take a hike, right? They're all voluntary programs. So what you have to, I think part of our job is showing people how it makes sense for them. They don't have to do stuff just out of the goodness of their heart. A lot of these, there might be an upfront cost on doing a buffer strip or doing cover crops. But I think after you get through that upfront cost, you end up making more money on your land. And showing people how we can find those win-wins That's how you ultimately convince people to do voluntary stuff. You got to hit them in their pocketbook, because we can't make anybody do anything. But Lake Monroe's a big focus for us. It's smack dab right in the middle of that map, as you know, and it's got an interesting mix of land use between agriculture. A bunch of it is Forest Service. People get some people get mad at the U.S. Forest Service for doing cutting within the Lake Monroe watershed. Other people think it's the most appropriate thing in the world. Reasonable minds can differ on stuff like that, but Lake Monroe is going to be a big focus for us. Liz?
Thank you for your presentation. I wondered about the lot or property size. Is there a minimum size you help or maximum, or what are those parameters?
Well, we won't have, and that actually helps me clarify our role in the thing. Ultimately, short answer is no minimum lot size, but we don't get to make that decision ultimately, because if somebody wants to put a permanent, like a conservation easement on their property, Conservation Law Center is not going to be the holder of that. It's going to be Sycamore Land Trust, or it's going to be, in the federal government sense, when that's appropriate, it'll be the NRCS, which is the Natural Resource Conservation Service. So the success of the program, we can be the smartest people in the world in terms of hooking up landowners and making them understand the parameters and the benefits. But ultimately, we are going to be really dependent on the relationships that we build with the other land trusts around the state, the federal agencies that are going to be involved, because they're going to be the ones actually enforcing the restrictions. So to answer your question, is there a minimum lot size? Not from us, but there might be for some of those partners. Like if you want to enroll your land into classified forest, you need at least 10 acres. That's a state program that might be involved in this thing sometimes. You'd need at least 10 acres to do classified forest. Sycamore will have its own, I don't want to speak for Sycamore, that's not appropriate anymore. But Sycamore has its own guidelines for, what is the right size of parcels, or the parcel sizes that they are looking for too.
Christian, how often do you run into people like the Huffs who are claiming the right to do whatever they want with their land on the shores of Lake Monroe?
Who's talking? Oh, God. All right, I'm looking at like, wow. All right, how do I, that's a loaded question. I just took a boat tour with Lake Monroe Water Fund yesterday and a SPIA class, and I made a point of going and driving out to the particular parcel that you're talking about on Lake Monroe. That's been in the newspaper. I don't know what was the exact question. Maybe I need to lawyer this one a little bit.
How often do you run into people like the Huffs, and how do you deal with them?
The reason I'm gonna fudge on this answer is because I don't know the Hobbs. It'd be impossible for me to say how often do I run into people like the Hobbs, and I don't know the Hobbs. I can see what they've done to that land, and maybe some of us would have made different choices if the land was ours, and maybe not. I mean, in fairness, if all of us had the wherewithal to buy a piece of property like that, I think some of us, at least in this room, would want to put a house on it. And we can look at somebody else and say, you're wrecking our lake, but who knows what would happen if we were in their shoes. So I don't know the Hobbs in particular, but I think you're using the Hobbs to say, like, people who maybe don't exhibit a particular sensitivity to nature and conservation issues. I'll speak to that so I don't have to besmirch the Hobbs, because I don't know them. That was pretty deft, if I say so. And the answer to that is, we work in Indiana. We're an environmental group in Indiana. I mean, if you ever had job security, do environmental work in Indiana. And if the question is how often do we run into people that don't have very good sensitivity to the environment, the answer is a lot. And it's our job to bridge those gaps. The most important, or to build those bridges, I mean. The most important job I ever had in my life professionally was the first one. I was a grassroots organizer in northern Wyoming in the Bighorn Mountains for the Powder River Basin Resource Council. We did fracking work before anybody called it fracking. This would have been the summer of '95. I lived with cattle ranchers, and everybody assumes that the ag community is negative on the environment. And that's not what I saw. What I saw was that they cared about They cared about all the same things I cared about, except for this much. And I think the people who do this wrong, do this kind of work wrong, focus on this as opposed to this. They cared about clean water. They cared about access to nature. They cared about their kids growing up with a bright future and a healthy environment. And when the environmentalists go around judging people because of the differences as opposed to finding commonality, I think we do a disservice to the movement. So it's our job, and it's my personal philosophy, that working with people who are not traditional allies is the most important work that we can do.
That it was illegal to build in the Lake Monroe watershed. Is that not true?
You're just trying to drag me back in. I can see it. I'm not taking it. I'm not taking the bait. It is not, you are allowed to build in the Lake Monroe watershed. There are restrictions that are through the county zoning plans. I mean, the big one that regards the lake is slope restrictions. You're not allowed to build on slopes of a path, on slopes that are steeper than a certain percentage. But you're allowed to do all sorts of building and timber harvesting and all sorts of extractive uses in the Lake Monroe watershed. That's totally legal. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian, for what you do and for your presentation today. We will make a contribution in your honor to New Hope for Families, which was founded in 2011 to really provide safe space for families of Monroe County who need help. So they'll appreciate, again, this. Next week's meeting will be in the Frangipani room. We're moving back up in this world. Jillian Rich will be our speaker. She's the owner of, get this, Mannered Mutts Training. Okay, anybody that owns a dog will love to hear what they're doing. It's a thriving local business founded in 2018, made up of a team of talented trainers, according to them. So we will see. Now, Michael, if you'll bring up the four-way test. The four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. First, is it the truth? Second,
Is it fair to all concerned?
third,
Will build goodwill and better friendships.
fifth,
Oh.
fifth, is it fun?
Yeah. Hey, how you doing? Good to see you. Hey, thanks.
I learned something just now.
All good.